Let's just talk about some predictions that we made, some thoughts we had in July and preview magazine season that already just feel a little uneasy. I, like many people, had Clemson playing for the ACC championship game. And then I watched what happened, albeit, it was a conference game, so never mind. They didn't even start out a conference. So I watched what happened against Duke, and here's the way I watched that. You can tell me what you thought about it. They had a bunch of turnover issues, and they ended up 28-7. I almost wish they wouldn't have had the turnover issues so that people could see, even if they played a much cleaner game, it just would have been a dogfight against Duke instead of a blowout loss against Duke. And so my point is, I think a lot of people, because of what history tells them about how turnovers are randomized week to week, a lot of people are falling back on that false sense of confidence and saying, up to and including the head coach there, once we get this cleaned up, we'll be fine, man. Like, once we get this cleaned up, we'll be off to the races. We'll be the same old Clemson. I just flat out don't believe that. I don't think they look special at all. I don't think their skill position talent out wide looks special outside of Will Shipley. There's nothing special to me about their tailback group. And therefore, I don't put it all on Cade Klubnik. I just don't know that he has the weaponry around him to make himself look overly special. And so I'm already feeling very nervous about that. It's not that they can't win a few games, but man, like the ACC collectively, we're going to talk about this later. If Miami looks good, forget about beating A&M. If they just look pretty good Saturday, that's yet another in a long list all of a sudden of potential roadblocks or really, really high hurdles for Clemson. Dude, I don't know if they're going to play for the conference championship. And if I had to bet today, because they're already 0-1 in conference, I'd say no. I don't think they're going to play for it, which then should force someone to ask me, okay, well, Josh, if not Clemson, who's going to be opposite FSU in that title game? And my answer is, well, settle down, buddy. It's only week 2. That's what my answer would be right now. Total hypocrite.
Which Clemson fans would tell you, settle down, buddy. It's only week 2. To the things that you brought up. I love the point, first off, guilty, had Clemson in that game. Didn't think it was going to be a great season. Didn't have them in the preseason top 10. A lot of folks are mad about that. But I'm with you in that it didn't look very special in a lot of places. I thought the defensive line had a chance too. I thought the linebackers had a chance too. Shipley is Shipley. He's a fantastic player. Even Cade Klubnik at times doesn't look special. And that's where they were different in years past, is that they had guys that you couldn't manage at receiver, at defensive line, at linebacker, at quarterback, at tailback. And I don't look at a lot of Clemson's roster that I saw Monday night as unmanageable. You brought up a great point on your show, I think it was Tuesday night, when you thought the most damning thing that came out of that broadcast was at the end of the game when Luganville said, I have seen no speed differential between these two teams on this field tonight. That's a holy mother statement to me, because like that's not supposed to happen. And we can talk about the 5-star differential, whatever the hell we want to talk about. But the reality is you saw two teams that athletically looked like they were on the same page. Now, there's a whole nother direction we can go with that, with transfers and where they are and what they're not getting and what other teams got. But then you go to the second half, and physically, Duke was the dominant team in that game up front on both sides of the ball. I love what you said about turnovers, because I didn't think those – Clemson's first score, if I'm not mistaken, came from a botched punt inside the 30, inside the 35. Score. Yeah. There. So, all right. So, I mean, that helped them. I didn't think that game was because of the turnovers. There was nothing flukish about that game. Duke took that game from Clemson in a lot of different ways. And to follow up something else you said there, I really like this. What does get cleaned up during a college football season? Maybe that's a conversation that we need to have at some point, because you can – I think I equated it to tackling when you said that. Give me a bad tackling team the first 3-4 weeks of the season that all of a sudden week 6 we were sitting here talking about, man, remember when that team couldn't get guys to the ground? Boy, they fixed that. What do you think they did in practice? They started rolling that giant donut stuff around the field, and they got it under control. Penalties last year. Like, if there's one coach that can get something figured out, it's probably Nick Saban. They couldn't get penalties figured out last year. I mean, literally could not come up with a solution to how not have 11 or 12 penalties a game. Like, most of these things, they don't autocorrect. It doesn't work that way. And yes, it's 1 week, it's one game, but man, that's a scary something to think that you might have to get corrected over the course of the season.
Yeah. Hey, stay in the Palmetto State, because, I mean, you watch offensive line for every one of these SEC teams at the very least. South Carolina was dreadful all along that unit. And Look, Shane Beamer and his staff, they're really good at marketing. They're really good at promotion. I think it serves them well, but a lot of times what it can do is it can lead to this false sense of security that everything's okay. And then you show up in week 1, and if everything's not okay, it can lead an outsider to say, bro, did you really not know this was coming? You seem so cheerful. You seem so upbeat. Did you not know that your offensive line was going to be a sieve? So you watched them. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. That kind of stuff normally doesn't get cleaned up unless you're getting hurt guys back, and that's not really what's going to happen with them on the O-line. I mean, what are they going to do the rest of the way? Because they don't have like a 5 or 6 week stretch before they get to their next tough game.
No, and some of the fronts they're going to play are just outright scary. I don't know another way to put it. I think you have to find ways to work around it for now, and maybe it can improve. I don't think this is good. It's not a group that's going to turn into 95 Nebraska all of a sudden at any point in the season. You got to work around it, and you go look at some different offenses over time that have not had a lot of talent up front or just not played great football up front, whether that's quick ball distribution out into the flat, or it's a couple of more quarterback runs that you have to add, different formations that remove defenders from the box, utilize tempo just a little bit more to try to wear some defenders down where maybe they don't have as much success rushing the passer against you. All those little things that you can add schematically are going to have to be added, because I think when Juice Wells gets back close to 100%, they still have good weapons, and they still have guys who can be matchup problems. It's just you're not going to have a ton of time to operate or do other things because of your offensive line. So you need to find ways to be successful on offense because of the other things that you have. And that may mean more quick protection, slide protection, 6-7-man protection. They got to get somebody back opposite Leggett to be able to offset it a little bit. But this is not a team, Josh, that I think 3, 4, even 8 weeks from now we're going to be talking about is living and dying by the run game and utilizing play action off of it. That's just there was too much that looked too bad in that opener against North Carolina.
So I don't know what else you're on the hook for. I mean, I'm on the hook for things such as having Oklahoma State playing for the Big 12 championship. And I mean, they skirted by someone last week. And then look, to Mike Gundy's credit, dude has no filter at this point in his life. Not that he really ever has much, but he just is in full DGAF mode every time he meets with the media. So he steps to the podium in Stillwater the other day and says, hey, guys, he's laughing at himself. He says, hey, guys, get this. So we kind of quietly sucked in week 1, so I met with my staff, and I started chewing them out, and I said, guys, if we do this against TCU, if we do that against TCU, when we do this against TCU, and he said one of my staffers had to stop me and say, Coach, we don't even play TCU this week, and I'm like, oh, no. Oh, and he's willing to admit it, too. So I'm not backing off of it. I'm going to ride it, but it is strictly because of this alleged schedule that you see on your screen here. If you're listening on podcast, somehow, some way, Oklahoma State plays in the Big 12. They play a conference schedule in the Big 12. And Cole, I kid you not, they play one team from the state of Texas, and it's Houston. That is my only hope at this point. I did not exactly see them firing on all cylinders like I hoped. So I think they got Arizona State Saturday. Of course, we're betting money on them. This piece of paper right here, kind of indicative of my hopes and dreams in Oak State at the moment.
I don't know if any have kind of crashed and burned like that. I have a couple that I'm second guessing. I had Kentucky as the second best team in the East. I think there's still a lot to like. I thought Trevin Wallace looked great at linebacker. Ray Davis looked awesome at tailback.
Yeah.
He kind of like him and Marshawn Lloyd out at USC. I feel like they just completely transformed their bodies as running backs, and they look like totally different individuals. I may have jumped. I'm not going to say I believe it, but maybe I jumped the gun on saying USC can't win a national title. I still don't believe they can, but they look good for 2 weeks in a row, so yay. But everything else, I mean, I had Texas. Okay, Baylor I thought was going to be a pretty good football team, so I didn't have them in the Big 12 title game. I had Texas and Kansas State, but yeah, that one was one that really surprised me that I would have been wrong on had you asked me what was Baylor going to be capable of this season. And they still the offense still put up yards.
Yeah.
They made mistakes. Some of those, as we just discussed, could be correctable. Some just may be a part of who you are inside of your DNA. That part of it I was more surprised about. The defense that they put on the field against a TJ Finley-led Texas State team, which not many of us thought we'd be saying this time around this early in the year.
Dude, I mean, speaking of Big 12 press conferences, before we move on, I was listening to Aranda because I wanted to know what went wrong when you lose as a 4-touchdown favorite and you're struggling just to stay in the game. And Dave Aranda never pulls punches, especially against himself anyway. You're almost like, Coach, take it easy on yourself a little bit. It's okay. It's not that bad. He said, hey, one of the problems we've had throughout fall camp is we cannot get our wide receivers lined up on the ball properly. And we thought we had it corrected. Like this last week of practice, we were good at it. And then all of a sudden, we could not even snap the ball half the game because we could not get our receivers lined up on ball, off ball. That right there, for a guy who I view as very detail-oriented, very attentive to that sort of stuff. I was talking to one dude close to Baylor. He says, we kind of feel like the result on the field has detached itself from what Aranda's personality is. And I've heard that before, not about him. I'm just saying I've seen teams where that happened before, and it never ends well. I don't exactly know what's going to happen out there, but I don't have a good feeling about Baylor at the moment.
Well, here's the weird part about just that individual statement. If that was Central Florida or Oklahoma or Ole Miss or Tennessee, I could get it because there's a whole different operation that you have to go to play that position for those schools and understand where to be and when to be there and how to get there. I mean, they teach certain guys to peel routes off at a certain point in time and not finish your route to go get lined up for the next play. Like what's official to hand the ball to. They spend time on that in camp. It's not something a lot of teams do, but that not there. I didn't expect to hear that. No. So you look at that. Is that correctable? Maybe. We go back to Florida. We talked about them last week. Like penalties, 2 guys with the same number on. By the way, Middle Tennessee had 2 38s on their punt team. Nobody saw it after a penalty, and they came back out again, which was a little bit egregious, I thought. Not a penalty on that. But some of these things are correctable, but that's just not one that I expected to hear from Baylor.